This message comes from Amazon Health. Why do doctor visits always require paperwork? With your permission, Amazon Health AI can connect to your health history for personalized care fast. Amazon Health AI is here. Healthcare just got less painful.
Just a heads up, y'all. This episode contains some salty language, which means it's finna be some cussing. What's good, y'all? You are listening to Code Switch, the show about race and identity from NPR. I'm Gene Demby. Okay, so when I was young, I used to be kind of embarrassed about where I lived. I grew up in a poor and working class neighborhood, and our little row house, that's me and my sister and my mom, had problems, y'all. Like, it was infested with mice. They would chew through the boxes of food that we had. I could hear them scurrying in the walls. Ugh. We didn't have hot water at all when I was in high school because we couldn't afford to replace the busted water heater, so we boiled our water to bathe every day. And as you might have guessed, we did not have guests over a whole lot. But we might have had mice in part because the house next door to us was abandoned, just like the spot diagonal from us across the street. I remember this one Sunday morning before church when that second row house caught fire, and we all watched, but we ain't really panicked because nobody lived there. In fact, bandos were kind of a defining feature of our neighborhood. The block just to the east of us was mostly boarded up row homes. And none of that struck me as weird or notable until I was a teenager, until I was in high school, when my friends' parents would drop me off and I would ask them to stop on the corner because I didn't want them to see exactly where I lived. But it's weird though, right? Because when I moved away, I grew to be ever more proud to be from this place and that block, as imperfect as it was. If you go on Zillow now, though, y'all, like that house, that tiny, narrow row home, that whole block, the whole neighborhood has completely changed. That house is worth more than $400,000 today. I saw the pics on Zillow. It's unrecognizable after the gut renovations, right? And there are no bandos now on that block or the blocks around us because white people and young, unmarried, upwardly mobile types want to live there now. Our neighborhood even has a new name or a couple new names. Some maps call it Southwest Center City. Some people call it Graduate Hospital. My mom had to move because the house we rented was being sold and she couldn't afford to live there anymore. Like a lot of folks, I have a lot of feelings about watching the place I grew up be terraformed like this. Watching people be pressed now to live on a block that I didn't want my friends to see up close when I was a kid. But it's the name thing that sticks with me the most, right? Like, this used to all just be South Philly. The older folks, the legacy residents, they still call it that. Now, this is happening, obviously, in once very undesirable urban neighborhoods all across the United States, right? Because cities are way safer now, and people want to take in all the upsides of living in a city. Walkability, culture, vitality, all that good stuff. Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, where I lived in my early 20s, was once the largest black neighborhood in the U.S., outside of the south side of Chicago. At the same time I was growing up in South Philly, Bed Stuy had a reputation, the homicide capital of the United States. There would be these breathless stories on national TV about the violence in that neighborhood. That's why Bed Stuy prefigures so much in the mythology of 90s hip-hop, right? Like, it's the backdrop of Jay-Z and Biggie's Rags to Riches tales. One that was highlighted when they collabed together on a track called Brooklyn's Finest.
Brooklyn, represent y'all. Hit your forge, you crazy. Think a little bit of rhymes can play me. I'm from Ossé, I'm varsity chump, you JV. Sugar Jay-Z.
Nigga, baby, my Bed Stuy flows malicious, delicious.
But that was never quite the whole story because there were black middle-class folks who bought up the big, beautiful brownstone buildings in that neighborhood. Homes that would have been worth a lot more were it not for the long tail of redlining and underinvestment that made Bed Stuy a black neighborhood in the first place. When I lived there in Bed Stuy in the early aughts, the homeowners on my block were mostly boomers or folks older than that. And there was just one white dude on our block. He was married to a black woman. They had this cute little cafe on the corner of Marcy and Putnam. I think it's still there. Now, there are lots of white folks clamoring to live on those tree-lined streets in those big houses. That now incredibly valuable real estate is why Bed Stuy has become a ground zero for this brazen scam called deed theft, when people have their homes stolen right from under their noses.
So deed theft is basically an epidemic of stolen homes, and mainly Black and brown homes here in New York City. There are hundreds of homeowners, mainly Black and brown people, who are experiencing deed theft, and it's a very traumatic experience.
That voice you're hearing belongs to Ossé. Chi is the city council member in New York City, and he represents a district in Brooklyn that includes Bed Stuy.
It's when a thief, approaches a homeowner, mainly a senior or an immigrant. Sometimes they make them sign fraudulent papers telling them that they're going to repair their homes or aid them in paying off their mortgage, but slipped into that paperwork is their deed, where they're signing it away to someone who is trying to steal their home.
And that's what we are getting into on this episode of Code Switch, because deed theft is not the slow-motion gentrification and displacement that we normally think about in these conversations, when people get pushed out because rent or property taxes are too high. No. This is somebody running off with the single most valuable thing your family might own, your house. Even when it's a house in a neighborhood that lots of people wouldn't want to visit, let alone live in, not all that long ago. Or maybe on a block you were too embarrassed to let your friends see. It's a crime that people are talking about more and more these days, and it's inflaming tensions over gentrification between those older Black residents who are worried about being displaced and the newer folks moving into the neighborhood. But it's also getting more scrutiny from concerned residents and organizers and lawmakers who are trying to put an end to it.
This message comes from Amazon Health. Late-night internet searches about health issues can send anyone into a spiral. There's another way to get help. Amazon Health AI can connect your symptoms with your medical history, and it can even get you care 24/7. So stop the endless search and get answers and care right when you need it. Amazon Health AI is here. Healthcare just got less painful. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Strawberry.me. Be honest. Are you happy with your job? Are you stuck in a job you've outgrown or never wanted in the first place? Are your reasons for staying really just excuses for not leaving? Let a career coach from Strawberry.me help you get unstuck. Discover the benefits of having a dedicated career coach in your corner and get 50% off your first coaching session at strawberry.me/NPR. This message comes from Bombas. Tired, achy legs slowing you down? Bombas compression socks help keep legs fresh on travel days, work days, leg days, and more. That's all-day relief with everyday style. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off.
Instead of scrolling mindlessly, engage mindfully with the NPR app. With a mix of on-demand news, stories from this station, and your favorite podcast, you can relax without shutting off your brain. Download the NPR app today.
When our producer X first told me about this deed theft thing, I was kind of incredulous because, that's so audacious. How do you steal somebody's whole house? But Chi Ossé said the scammers who do this, they have a lot of tricks up their sleeves.
There's many different forms in terms of how this takes place. The more traditional route is definitely knocking on doors. Sometimes it's a long game plan of soliciting a homeowner, calling them, leaving leaflets, saying that they will help pay off their mortgage. Sometimes they do it through a distant family member, and sometimes they forge a signature. So there's various different techniques that an individual can use to steal someone's home. And it came onto my radar first because a couple years ago, my grandmother, who was an immigrant from Haiti, she had a stroke. And still, even after that, she owned a home in Crown Heights. There are people who were still knocking on her door, calling her phone number, trying to force her to sell her home. And now, as a member of the city council, representing the neighborhood of Bed Stuy, where we've seen the largest displacement and exodus of Black people over the past 10 years than any other community in the city, this is a responsibility of mine to take seriously.
So news reports have said that incidents of deed theft are skyrocketing. So what is happening in Brooklyn that a crime like this in particular is on the rise?
Yeah, I think real estate companies, those who want to make the biggest buck out of selling someone's home, are seeing that neighborhoods that maybe weren't seen as desirable as newcomers 10 to 20 years ago, to 30 years ago, are now seen as desirable. And because of that, I truly believe that there's a correlation between gentrification, the increase in property value, as well as which neighborhoods are then targeted for deed theft. And that's what I believe to be, the cause and effect of how those deed theft cases have skyrocketed over the past couple of years. The larger public has seen Bed Stuy and Crown Heights as hot up-and-coming neighborhoods that people are moving to. And so then deed thieves see that as a cash grab when it comes to stealing people's homes and deeds.
Can you give us a sense of scale here? How big a problem is deed theft in Brooklyn?
Yeah, so from 2023 to 2025, complaints to the Attorney General's office increased by 240%. From 2014 to 2023, we've seen about 3,500 complaints citywide. And, while that may sound like a smaller number to some people don't even know that they're experiencing deed theft, right? These are only complaints that actually come through to some of our city databases. Sometimes our seniors don't know that they're victims of deed theft. Sometimes immigrant families don't know what is happening to them when their deed, is stolen. And in 2025 alone, more than 500 complaints were recorded and were reported, which is a larger number than we've seen in recent years.
Okay, so we don't know how long this has been going on, but we know that there are more people filing reports, so we might be getting a better sense of the bigger picture.
My name is David Brand. I'm a housing reporter for the public radio station WNYC and the news site Gothamist here in New York City.
David has been covering these scams for a while now, and he said there are reasons why people are targeting the homeowners in neighborhoods like Bed Stuy specifically.
So it's happening primarily in central Brooklyn, neighborhoods like Bed Stuy, Crown Heights, as well as southeast Queens. And what these two sections of New York City have in common is that they are historically predominantly Black neighborhoods with a lot of Black middle-class homeowners, a lot of homes that have been in families for many years and that are very valuable. And those are the areas we're seeing being targeted by scammers and by investors and by flippers.
What makes those Black homeowners in those neighborhoods particularly vulnerable to scams, though? Why would they be targeting them in particular? Because clearly those aren't the only valuable homes in New York City, obviously.
That's right. Yeah. So I think there's a few reasons. I think there's a lot of older homeowners in those neighborhoods who might be more susceptible to scams, or older homeowners who die and don't have a will. And so that triggers family disputes over these properties. There's people who in those sections of the city who I think you might consider house rich, cash poor. And so they might be in financial trouble and may need might be susceptible to someone saying, hey, I'll bail you out. I'll give you some money for your house when it's really just a fraction of what that home is worth.
Mm-hmm. And so now that people are moving back into cities and those neighborhoods are gentrifying, these brownstones, these beautiful brownstones are suddenly really, really desirable. And, Bed Stuy, at one point I think it was read it was the second largest majority Black neighborhood in the country after the south side of Chicago. I think Bed Stuy is also the sort of epicenter of a lot of anxieties around gentrification in particular, because it is a neighborhood that has been so closely associated with African-American people, Afro-Caribbean people in New York City. And now it's very much changing.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, this was a disinvested community, a high rate of crime, high rate of poverty, and it has totally changed where these beautiful brownstones are now so desirable and so expensive. And a 3-story brownstone in Bed Stuy could sell for $3 million. And if you can get your hands on one of these properties, either through deed theft, deed fraud, or just by paying way below what the home is actually worth, you could really cash in. And I think that's the main reason we're seeing all of this fraud concentrated in a neighborhood like Bed Stuy.
David, you talk to a lot of people who have experienced deed theft, including a Brooklyn man named Michael Baker. There's also a documentary made by Brick, they're a Brooklyn media and arts organization, where Michael also told his story about deed theft.
My name is Michael Baker. I live in Brooklyn, New York, 435 Herzl Street, from 1963. My moms and pops bought that house.
Can you just tell us a little bit about Michael Baker and what he went through?
Yeah, well, I think Michael Baker's story is really frustrating. And I think also really representative of the kinds of fraud and deceptive tactics that we see throughout New York City, and especially in a neighborhood like he lives in Brownsville, which is right next to Bed Stuy.
My mom's is from Cuba by way of Jamaica, and my father's from Jamaica. They bought the house in 1963. My mom, when she first got this place, I think she said she got it for like $23,000. It was reasonable when she got it. I mean, we held on to it from that time until I got evicted.
He says his father was behind on taxes when he inherited the property. He wasn't able to cover the tens of thousands of dollars in back taxes, so he, was looking for a way to get a loan. He says he connected with someone he knew, who put him in touch with someone else he knew, who he thought he could trust, who said, I can help you get financing, help you get a loan if you sign over the deed to your home, and we'll add you to this new third-party LLC that's going to be in control of the home. He says that didn't happen, that instead the people he transferred the property to then flipped it to another company for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that it has changed hands multiple times, which creates this chain of ownership that can be very hard to untangle, especially when lenders get involved and make additional loans on the property. And he's just been stuck for now close to 7 years in court trying to reclaim the property he says he was wrongfully evicted from and wrongfully, what he says, stolen.
The marshal was like, you gotta go, you know what it is. And then he said there was nothing that he could do because that was his job to do. He had the locksmith here. They throw me out on my street for a house that I own. I'm not getting any money, and I'm now homeless.
So in the cases like this, what kind of arguments do the people who have taken these properties, who've seized these properties through all these sort of shady dealings, right? What kind of arguments do they make in court about how they came up on these houses?
Mm-hmm. Well, they just point to the documents in the city's property record system and say, look, he signed over the deed, he took out this loan, and so this is all above board. And maybe it is for way less than the home is actually worth, but once there are actually official documents filed with the city's property record system, that kind of gives that another layer of legality that can be hard to try to untangle.
So Michael ended up without any home. Is that typically what happens in cases like these?
Well, it happens a lot. And so people who are the longtime homeowners, or they are the family of a longtime homeowner and think they inherited the property, think they are entitled to it, they find themselves getting evicted because there is a new owner legally. And so it is relatively common. I mean, he has video from that day showing the marshals coming and the new owner. There's a dispute over the owner saying, I told them not to do this to you. And that kind of has formed some of the basis of his legal challenge. But it definitely happens often that people who are longtime residents, either they have owned the property or a family member has, they suddenly find themselves in housing court facing eviction and getting evicted by city marshals.
I left a lot of stuff behind. I'm a DJ, so I have a collection of records worth a whole lot of money. I left furniture in there. I mean, we've been living here for almost 59 years. I had a family downstairs. They had to leave. I had a family upstairs that have been with me for maybe 13, 14, 15 years. They had to move. Then I had my niece that was living with me because she had just had a baby, my grandnephew. So she had to leave with her son. And then my son was staying with me downstairs, so he had to leave also and go back to his mom's.
So when someone like Michael loses their home, it can have this sort of domino effect. When you talk to Michael and other people who have experienced this, were you surprised at how little recourse they had once this deed was sort of stolen out from under them?
Yeah, at first I was, when I used to think about this problem before I knew more about it. It's like, well, this is deed theft. This is someone's biggest expense, biggest asset is their home, and it's just getting taken from them. Why isn't there more enforcement? Why is this so hard to prove? And then I learned more about it. And I think, talking about the case with Michael, of how many documents get filed in the city's property record system, how many legal defenses these investors, these scammers, these companies have, then lenders with a lot of money get involved and say, hey, we made a loan on this property. We checked the title on it. It all looked fine to us. We are disputing this lawsuit trying to get this property back. We made the loan. We're getting paid back on it. You have additional owners who are claiming like maybe the original way this was taken was through fraud or deception, but we bought it fair and square, and now we live here. So it does make it really complicated. And it showed me that the most effective thing is just to prevent it from happening in the first place, and to, have like free or low cost, good attorneys available through these nonprofit legal groups or through the city to try to help people if they're in financial trouble, so they don't have to turn to shady lenders to try to bail them out, who then turn out to take their property from them, or estate planning services so that people can make wills and clearly outline who gets their property after they die. Then that's really the most important way to stop this stuff from happening.
Every time I was talking to people about this story that we're doing on deed theft, and people are like, what is that? And I explain it just on the top line. People are like, wait, what? You can just go up and take somebody's house, right? It feels so, it's shady, but it's so brazen.
Yeah, and you think about like media coverage around a few years ago, there was like, I guess, a rise in petty theft or like shoplifting, and you have like Dwayne Reed and CVS like locking up their shampoo and saying like, look, shoplifting's on the rise. People are stealing shaving cream, and that gets like front page treatment in a tabloid. Meanwhile, people are getting their houses stolen from them, and there's a lot less appetite to try to enforce that and try to fight back against that. It's complicated. I think it's time intensive for prosecutors and the Attorney General's office to handle these cases. And so they probably don't even really have the manpower to take on all of these, even though it's millions of dollars worth of properties that are getting taken through theft, fraud, deception.
So you said it creates this sort of like labyrinthine sort of chain of ownership. It changes hands a bunch of times. Do we have any sense of who the people are who are committing these deed thefts? Like, what do we know about who they are? Are they like giant corporate interests? Are they like small private landlords? Like, who are these folks?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, they're not like giant corporations that are doing this. It's usually rings of investors that can come up with their strategy for targeting homeowners that are really knowledgeable about the city's legal system and how to find homeowners who might be in financial distress or might be like ripe for exploitation or willing to turn over a piece of their property for a small amount of money. They're pretty sophisticated in that way. And so we usually see bands of people working together on this. Then you see people doing some of these things that don't rise to the level of illegality, at least according to prosecutors, but they know how to find homeowners who are in trouble. They know how to take advantage of family disputes or unclear chains of ownership in families and really take advantage of that. And they seem to all have a role in this process, and that what they have in common is they end up getting these properties for way less than they're worth and making a lot of money from them.
When we come back,
that's why this issue is so infuriating. I talk to so many people who have been victims of this and say, my immigrant parents worked low-paying jobs in the 1960s and scraped all their money together and were able to afford this home. And now it was just taken from me and taken from my family.
That's coming up, y'all. Stay with us.
This message comes from Vanta. Risk and regulations are ramping up, and customers now expect proof of security just to do business. Vanta automates your compliance process and brings compliance, risk, and customer trust together on one AI-powered platform. So whether you're prepping for a SOC 2 or running an enterprise GRC program, Vanta keeps you secure and keeps your deals moving. That's not just faster compliance, it's more time for growth. Get started at Vanta.com.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. If you're tired of spending hundreds on big wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/switch. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. This message comes from Bombas. Comfy footwear is the last thing you want to worry about this summer. Bombas sandals and slides are perfect for beach days, barbecues, and everything in between. Go to bombas.com/NPR. This message comes from Instacart. Instacart knows not all bananas are created equal. Some want them green, some ripe, some want them ready right now. With Instacart's Preference Picker available at most retailers, you can choose preferences like avocado ripeness or deli thickness before your shopper starts. So instead of hoping for the best, you get groceries picked the way you would pick them. Download the app and get bananas just how you like with Instacart.
Gene this week, Code Switch. We've been talking about this scheme called deed theft that is raising tensions over gentrification in cities like New York. Deed theft is when a scammer or somebody, posing as a legitimate lender swindles a homeowner out of their home by getting them to unknowingly sign over the deed to their property. And David Brand, a reporter at WNYC and Gothamist, says that this is part of a larger, longer history of predatory real estate practices that have targeted Black homeowners around the country.
You're taking homes and valuable properties from longtime homeowners, especially Black homeowners in neighborhoods like you mentioned, Central Brooklyn, Southeast Queens. So it seems like the worst possible outcome, but also the result of years of discrimination and discriminatory lending policies. Like these are the same neighborhoods that were also, became predominantly Black neighborhoods because of redlining. These were the places that Black homeowners could get a loan or could move. And now they are the neighborhoods where home values are soaring and where scammers are targeting people to try to get their homes and flip them for way more than they get them for.
Right. Yeah, these are neighborhoods where Black people could buy because nobody was going to lend to them, right? Because white people didn't want to buy there, right? And so these were people bought in Bed Stuy to the extent that they could because that's where they could buy. And now a much broader universe of people want to live in Bed Stuy and places like it. And so now those same people who were sort of sequestered in Bed Stuy as homeowners are now getting displaced. How big an issue is this outside of New York City? Obviously, there's all these dynamics that are like true specifically of New York City. Like, how is this playing out in places that are not Brooklyn and Manhattan and the Bronx and Queens?
Yeah, well, I think it's getting a lot of attention in New York City and becoming more well-documented. We have 5 different prosecutors because we have an attorney general who's from Central Brooklyn who has made this a priority of her work. So we hear about it a lot in New York City. We know a lot about it in New York City, but I do think it's happening anywhere there are soaring home values. So I think it is happening in a lot of places. It's definitely getting a lot of attention in New York City, but I think for me and for other reporters, should be something we focus on outside of the city as well.
You mentioned that Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, has made fighting deed theft a priority of hers. From your perspective, from your reporting, do you think enforcement is catching up to the scale of this problem?
No, definitely not. I mean, we've seen the number of cases and complaints rise. Enforcement has not kept pace. State lawmakers have passed new measures that are trying to curb some of the ways that scammers get these properties. But to your question, no, enforcement has not kept pace with the amount of deception and fraud and deed theft that's happening in New York City.
Why is the burden of proof so high with this crime? Because you mentioned like the value of the homes. The homes are changing hands with almost no money being exchanged, right? Like, I mean, if you said these like $1 million homes, shouldn't that be a giant red flag to the people who are looking at this? Like, wait a second, something is amiss here.
Yeah, you would think so. I think what gets hard though is when there are legal documents involved, and if someone does sign a deed, it's hard to unwind that and say, well, I signed that under false pretenses. How do you prove that? How do you prove the deception? How do you say, well, they told me it was this, but it actually turned out to be a deed or something transferring ownership? You're right. That's what can be so infuriating about this. Like you look at it and think, why would anyone sell a $2 million brownstone in Bed Stuy for, whatever it is, $10,000 and sign this document signing over their family's home. Just seems like there's like a level of common sense there that would point to something is fishy here. But I just don't think the courts are like equipped for that, or that that's the way they approach this if there are legal documents involved. And then that is what becomes so hard to prove. Like, well, you say there was deception, you say there was fraud. Can you prove that? And that's where the burden really grows on the person who was the homeowner and says the home was taken from them.
And then the homeowner is up against basically this very sophisticated sort of scam network, right? And they've been targeted very specifically. And they're, after the fact, trying to like prove that they were scammed. And the people who've scammed them out of their homes, they can hide behind all sorts of legal apparatuses. Wow, that was just, I feel for those people so much.
Yeah, and that's why this issue is so infuriating, and why it's like so, I just think like touches people on a visceral level, because it's like, this is your home. This is what you worked for. This is what your family worked for. And I talk to so many people who have been victims of this and say, my immigrant parents worked low-paying jobs in the 1960s and scraped all their money together and were able to afford this home. And now it was just taken from me and taken from my family. And why I think this touches people on a level beyond just like financial, that this is like really a problem that we need to address here in New York City, and I think everywhere where this is happening.
I think it's one of the most vile crimes in the city, right?
Ossé, the New York City Councilmember we talked to a little earlier, he says addressing deed theft is his number one priority.
Stealing someone's home is kind of just a historic sin in human history. I think that's why the world is in the place that it is today, right? Because people's homes are stolen, and for that to happen on this scale is something that I want to stop in any way that I can.
In April, Chi was arrested by the New York City police when he was trying to stop the eviction of one of the residents in his district who claimed to be a victim of deed theft. Things got ugly. The police yoked him up. He ended up with a concussion.
2 days later, that's when New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani started that Office of Deed Theft Prevention. And so I think that it really did have a galvanizing effect on making people aware of this issue and aware of this problem, and the city to crack down on it more.
When I talked to Chi, he could not really go into detail about the arrest because, it's still unfolding. There's still legal proceedings around that incident. Now, Chi, though, rose to prominence back in 2020 during the height of the protests for racial justice all around the country following the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And, we just couldn't help but wonder how his prior life as someone raging against the system was shaping his new career as someone working inside it.
There was a level of urgency that I had through the Black Lives Matter movement and through the organizing that we were doing there. It really felt like the end of the world in 2020 with the pandemic, with BLM. And I wanted to see immediate change, which is very funny now because I am, someone who works in government, where you don't see that often. But what I find consistent between where I was 6 years ago and where I am now is that I have that same fire of urgency within the work that I do on, the government or political level. And it yields some great results. And I know sometimes I push it a little bit. Sometimes, but I think it's people have been appreciative of that voice that I bring to just what I do and who I am. And also yielding results that I think helps people and keeps people in their homes.
Okay, so let's say you have somebody in your family, or maybe you yourself, are sitting on a property that some shady folks might want to surreptitiously take off your hands. How could you help deed theft-proof your home? We wanted to leave you with a few tips from a legal expert who has been in the trenches on cases like these.
My name is Isatu Barry. I'm a law professor at Brooklyn Law School and a housing attorney. I run a clinic called the Housing Justice Center. And in our clinic, we help low-income New Yorkers with their property needs. So we draft wills and estate planning documents in order to help those homeowners protect their property. But we also do workshops in the community. So we've done workshops at churches and AARP meetings on what it is to draft a will and what that really means, but also on deed theft to let people know the warning signs of that. Each city or state has some type of registry, and having a copy of the deed can be very helpful, a helpful thing to have. There are these things called transfer on death deeds, which are legal in New York and different states as well, where the homeowner can say, once I pass, I want my home to go to this individual or these individuals. That's another way of showing intent, right? Showing that I had no plan to sell this. And that's more of a form rather than a will where you have to kind of express a lot of different things. Maybe adding a name to the mortgage, adding a name to the deed, creating a paper trail of the intent. And that can be done in a lot of different ways, but it starts first with having those difficult conversations. And I don't want to minimize that those conversations are difficult, but it is a part of creating that legacy and creating that generational wealth.
All right, y'all, that is our show. But heads up, we have a newsletter, which you should subscribe to. You can do that by going to npr.org/codeswitchnewsletter. This episode you're listening to was produced by Xavier Lopez. It was edited by Courtney Stein, and our engineer was Robert Rodriguez. And thank you to Brick, the Brooklyn Media Arts Company that made the documentary that we heard pieces of in this episode. And of course, we would be remiss if we did not shout out the rest of the Code Switch Massive that brings you the show. That's Christina Kalla, Jess Kung, Leah Danella, Dahlia Mortada, Maya Dangerfield, Barton Girdwood, Yolanda Sangweni, and B.A. Parker. As for me, I'm Gene Demby. Be easy, y'all.
This message comes from NetSuite. They say that every day your business is late to AI, you fall 2 days behind. Fortunately, there's NetSuite Next. NetSuite Next is where your business meets AI because AI is built into everything you do. It automatically surfaces custom insights throughout your day. AI agents work alongside you to solve problems. It's just like you're having a conversation with a colleague. If your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, try NetSuite Next for free. Go to netsuite.ai/story.
This message comes from Jerry. Many people are overpaying on car insurance. Why? Switching providers can be a pain. Jerry helps make the process painless. Jerry is the only app that compares rates from over 50 insurers in minutes and helps you switch fast with no spam calls or hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Before you renew your car insurance policy, download the Jerry app or head to jerry.ai/NPR.